50 minutes into Canada's World Cup match against Qatar in Vancouver, the entire mood of the night changed in an instant. What should have gone down as one of the most dominant performances in Canadian football history suddenly became something far darker, far more emotional, and far more unforgettable. Canada were flying. The crowd at BC Place was electric. Jonathan David was in ruthless form. The home side looked like a team ready to announce itself to the world. But then came one challenge, one horrible moment, and one sound that, according to those closest to it, nobody on the Canadian bench will ever forget. Jesse Marsch later said you could hear the bones snap. Think about that for a second. In the middle of a World Cup match, with a nation celebrating in the stands and a team cruising toward a huge result, the sound everyone remembers is not the roar after a goal, but the sound of a player's leg breaking right in front of the bench. From that moment on, the scoreline stopped mattering. Canada would eventually win 6-0. Jonathan David scored a hat-trick. Nathan Saliba added a brilliant free kick. The result should have been the headline everywhere the next morning. But nobody was really talking about the goals. They were talking about Ismaël Koné, about the brutal late challenge that left him on the ground, about the fear on the faces of his teammates, about the red cards, the chaos between the benches, and the haunting realization that one of Canada's most important players may have just seen his World Cup end in the cruelest way possible. And what made it all even heavier was the fact that this wasn't just any player caught in the wrong moment. Kone is one of the brightest midfield talents Canada has produced in years, a player whose journey to this stage has been anything but easy. He came through CF Montreal with enormous promise, developed quickly, and earned the kind of attention that told everyone around him he was meant for the highest level. His rise was fast, but not simple. There were opportunities, setbacks, flashes of brilliance, and periods where consistency still felt just out of reach. Europe gave him chances, but it also tested him. For a while, he looked like a player still waiting for his perfect moment to fully arrive. And then, right before this World Cup, it felt like everything was finally coming together. His form had improved, his confidence was growing, and for Canada, he was becoming exactly the kind of dynamic, creative midfield presence you need if you want to do something special on the biggest stage in the sport. That's why this moment hit so hard. This wasn't just an injury. This felt like a dream being interrupted in real time. Before the challenge, Canada were in complete control. They were already 3-0 up at halftime, playing with confidence, pace, and the kind of aggression that makes a team look dangerous in tournament football. Qatar were already under pressure, already struggling to live with Canada's movement, and already down to 10 men. Everything about the night suggested this was going to be a celebration, the kind of home World Cup performance fans remember forever with pride. But in the 50th minute, Kone released the ball, and the challenge came in from behind, late and reckless, with no chance for him to protect himself. The reaction around the pitch told the story before any replay ever could. Players immediately started waving for medical help. The bench knew it was serious. The stadium fell into that awful kind of silence that only happens when everyone realizes football has suddenly become something much more frightening. Medical staff rushed in. Kone stayed down. An air cast was placed on his leg almost immediately, and the urgency of the treatment made it obvious that this was not a minor knock, not a player trying to buy time, not something he was going to run off after a few painful seconds. This was real, this was severe. And while doctors worked on him, emotions boiled over everywhere else. Teammates were distraught. Opponents looked shaken. Benches started clashing. Tempers flared not because the game was close, but because everyone understood that one challenge had just changed the entire story of the night. The tackle brought a straight red card, reducing Qatar even further, but by then the football itself almost felt irrelevant. Reports afterward suggested fractures to both the tibia and fibula, the kind of injury that instantly changes the conversation from, can he continue, to, how long will recovery take, and, will he be the same player when he comes back? Those are the cruel questions that arrive the second a serious injury happens in a tournament like this. One moment you are living the biggest night of your career in front of your home fans, and the next you are being carried off on a stretcher on the way to emergency surgery. That contrast is what made the scene so devastating. As Kone was finally wheeled away, the stadium rose to its feet. Thousands of fans applauded not in celebration, but in support. It was one of those rare moments where football drops all its noise and drama and becomes painfully human. The cheers were no longer about winning. They were about one player, one person, and one heartbreaking image. And somehow, Even through the pain, Kone managed to lift a hand and give the crowd a thumbs up from the stretcher. That image alone tells you everything about why this moment will stay with people long after the final standings are forgotten. It was courage, pain, heartbreak, and connection all compressed into a few seconds. Jesse Marsch later said he had not yet spoken to Kone immediately after the game because the midfielder had already been taken to hospital where his family was with him and surgery awaited. Think about what that means. Hours earlier, this should have been the night of his life. A home World Cup, a huge performance, a nation behind him, a place in the knockout stage within reach. Instead, it became a hospital night, a surgery night, and maybe the end of his tournament before it had fully begun. And yet, for Canada, the night somehow produced another unforgettable moment, one that transformed pain into tribute. 14 minutes after Kone left the pitch, Nathan Saliba stepped over a free kick and buried it. But it wasn't just the goal that mattered, it was what he did next. He formed the number 8 with his hands, Kone's number, then ran to the touchline, picked up his teammate's jersey, and held it high to the crowd. In that moment, the match stopped being about tactics or statistics or even qualification. It became about brotherhood. It became about letting a teammate know, wherever he was watching from, that he was still part of this night, still part of this team, still at the center of everything they were fighting for. Nobody can script a moment like that. It happens because emotion takes over. It happens because players care. It happens because football, at its deepest level, is about far more than what the scoreboard says. Of course, the story didn't settle there. By full time, tensions had spilled over again, with heated scenes between the Canada and Qatar benches. There was anger, confrontation, and the kind of emotional fallout you expect when a match has crossed the line from competitive into traumatic. Marsch made it clear afterward that from his point of view, there was no real debate to be had about the red card. A player had suffered a horrific injury. A leg had been broken. The damage was visible to everyone. That was the reality. What complicated the story, though, was the report that the player responsible personally went to apologize to Kone afterward. On one level, that apology matters. It suggests remorse, humanity, and an understanding of the pain caused. But on another level, it also deepens the contrast between individual regret and the wider reaction from the bench in the heat of the moment. That tension is part of what makes this whole story so emotionally complex. One player appeared sorry. The wider scene felt angry, chaotic, and defensive. And now Canada are left to carry all of that into the rest of their tournament. On paper, this was a perfect result. A 6-0 win. A hat-trick from Jonathan David. A huge step toward the knockout rounds. Momentum, confidence, and a statement to the rest of the world. But emotionally, it felt like something had been taken away from them even in victory. Because when you lose a player like Kone, you are not just losing minutes in midfield. You are losing energy, creativity, drive, chemistry, trust, and presence. You are losing one of the players who helps define the way the team breathes in big moments. And maybe the biggest question now is not whether Canada are good enough to move forward. The biggest question is what kind of emotional weight they are now carrying into every remaining match. Can they turn this heartbreak into motivation? Can they use this pain as fuel? Can they keep this run alive for the teammate who can no longer be on the pitch with them? That is what makes the story bigger than the injury itself. Because from this point on, every Canada game will feel different. Every goal will carry a little more meaning. Every celebration will feel connected to the player they lost. And if this team does go deep into the tournament, people may look back on this night not just as the moment Canada won 6-0, but as the night their World Cup truly changed, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Football at this level is never only about the result. Sometimes it reveals character, sometimes it reveals pain, and sometimes, in the cruelest moments, it reveals just how much these players mean to one another when everything is on the line.